h4 is played, maybe trying for a light squared grip actually. With a move like h5 and knight h4, you could imagine, you know, the light squares being more intensely under pressure. Rook d8, and then actually queen b5, putting more pressure on c6, asking black, you know, what is he doing about c6 now? Well, Topalov calmly just retreats this knight, so both knights protecting each other. So the rook does seem awkwardly placed though, but how to exploit that? It's difficult, for example, for white to arrange knight d2 to e4 to hit that rook. What white does instead is play queen b2. Okay, this provides some new options, maybe like bishop b4, with the queen more ideally placed. And if, for example, you know, knight takes b4, then a b4 becomes an option without the queen being targeted as a tactical vulnerability on b5. For example, you know, if knight moves, then the queen would be attacked. So bishop d5, and then actually bishop b4 did happen. So trying to exploit that awkward rook on d6. So black now took on b4, and now a takes b4, and it turns out actually soon this pawn is a little bit vulnerable, that b pawn. Black has in theory the potential later to create a pass pawn, so white really wants to seal up this possibility of a pass pawn by playing b5, but in playing b5 that pawn is going to become a little bit weaker. Rook c6, and now b5 is actually played. It's kind of tempting to do this because it also kind of marks the c6 square, as well as clamping down on moves like a5, because, you know, en passant. So b5 is a multi-purpose move, but maybe as the pieces get exchanged it becomes a little bit more controversial. So rook takes c2, rook takes c2. Now Topalov plays the move bishop e6. Kind of curious. Again though, keeping flexibility now to play knight d5, for example. So d4 is played finally. So acknowledging that black might play e4, but white doesn't mind. He plays knight d2. And here, if a move like f5, then maybe e3 with the potential to play like knight c4 and knight e5 if black's not careful. So actually, instead of f5, Topalov decides to simplify with queen d4. Maybe he's trying, you know, to exploit this potential weakness, this b5. So getting the queens off now. And in this ending, it seems, you know, white has to play kind of accurately if he doesn't want to lose this pawn. So Topalov plays on. He's piling up the pressure now on both sides of the board. First he's playing for g5. So this potentially clamps down on white's structure. If black ever plays g4, it's a bit of a double-edged move, actually creating weaknesses in black's position, but it would clamp down on white's structure if black was tempted for g4. But actually f4 is played now, which makes g4 far less attractive. There's no f4 pawn clamp. So after this move, g takes is played. After e takes, it seems as though this pawn has become a bit weaker, but are there enough resources on either side for weakness to be truly exploitable? So rook d4 has maybe ideas like, you know, rook a4, rook a5, so that attacks the b pawn without being a tactical, you know, liability. And then later, you know, maybe bishop c4, just trying to rob white of that b pawn. So king f2 was played. Now knight f5. So with knight f5, that introduces the possibility of knight d6 attacking that pawn as well. Bishop f3, and actually bishop d5 was played. So now inviting another exchange of pieces. So with all these exchanges, you know, this b pawn is becoming a little bit more vulnerable. So knight d2, the bishops come off. Now rook a4. So again, rook a5 is really now on the cards with the potential of knight d6 and snapping up that pawn. So it's here things are turning kind of interesting. Maybe some of the spectators were falling a little bit asleep, expecting a quick draw here. I was following it on chessgames.com, and Nigel Short was saying, you know, maybe white, I think he was saying white needs to, you know, play a lot more carefully now. If he doesn't want to lose that pawn, it will be like difficult. He has to play accurately. But Anand actually chooses what I thought he would do. If I was in this position, I'd just go for the black king. I'd establish a pawn on f5. And then try and use e6 with my knight. I wouldn't bother trying to defend this pawn. And in fact, this is the way that Anand played. I'm not kidding. No, seriously, this is how I'd have played it. I would, you know, this pawn, I wouldn't like to be on the defensive. So Anand, he turns this from a seemingly, you know, there's potential to be put on the defensive here. He just gambits the b pawn. He plays g4, and after knight d6, he's saying to black, fine, take my b pawn. He just plays calmly the move king g3. So Topalov can pile up more pressure now with, say, rook a5, but actually he plays check, and now knight d6 again. Okay, slightly dislodged the king. He's hitting f4 immediately. So what is white doing about f4? Well, Anand decides to play rook d2, just gambiting that b pawn. So what does he get for this gambit in this very simplified position? Well, he plays the move f5, and personally I was excited by the prospects of, say, king h5 unpinning, and then to play g5 to try and get a dangerous passed pawn. And if ever this black knight moves away from d4, then knight d4 to e6, and you can imagine with a rook on the 7th, this could be really dangerous for the black king. So I kind of liked Anand's style here, just giving up that b pawn. I know it's controversial, but you know, I thought it was an exciting continuation now. And in fact, it gets a little bit more exciting now. King h5 also introduces maybe ideas of knight h4 to g6, as well as rook d7 being on the cards. So rook e3 was played. Now knight h4 was indeed played. Okay, and I was looking at possibilities. You know, maybe if the king moves up and then check. You know, if the king ever got to g6, attacking f6, and with rook d7, then there will be potential for two passed pawns. But Topalov is very careful to prevent this kind of stuff. He plays actually knight c3. Okay, these pawns may be on a roll soon, especially b pawns being unblocked. So check, rook e7. Now rook d3, actually an interesting move, hitting the knight, and maybe, you know, preparing like rook h3 at some point. But also, you know, knight g6 is made possible without the harassing, you know, check from black on h3. I think that's the main point here. So knight e4, knight g6. And now, you know, there's some ominous threats like rook d8, king h8, and say rook f8, almost like a mating net could be woven around the black's king in some variations. So Topalov is careful to avoid this. He hits the white rook, inviting in this position rook d8, but I don't think it's that effective here. Let's have a quick look. This is the move played, rook a3, just seemingly actually just keeping in mind g5. But let's have a look if it did, you know, launch the rook into the black position with rook d8. Let's check this now. Rybka, let's turn Rybka on here. So rook d8. Okay, let's say rook e8. It seems fairly harmless here. There's no rook d7. If we take, I think g5 is not effective here. Okay, so a5, for example, and it's difficult, you know, if white just munches that pawn, maybe black could just ignore it, a4, and these double pawns are just too slow. Maybe a3, they're just too slow. If we look at this position, this key d7 square is covered, and so a2 is like a winning threat, I believe, in this position. Okay, so Anand can't possibly go in for this continuation with rook d8. So instead, he plays, let's go back, he plays in this position rook a3. Okay, so rook d7 was played, and now let's turn Rybka off. Rook e3. He's still got the threat though of g5, which he actually uses in this position now. g5, trying to create the passed f pawn, but b5, the black pawns are coming. Now knight f4 introduces some new ideas like knight e6, b4, but there's also another cunning idea, which is just to play g6 now. So again, there's some potential for things like rook e8 and maybe king g4 and knight h5 if black's not careful. But Topalov puts the time limit on white, you know, white's activities with b3. So let's again check out, you know, is rook e8, is it actually playable in this position? It may prove to be too slow. This pawn seems too dangerous. Let's check this position as well, just out of interest. If rook e8 here, okay, so rook e8 here, this might be enough for a draw in any case.